Hello and welcome back to another episode of Real Estate Renovators, the business advisory show for real estate professionals. My name's Chanel. I'm 2 Aperol spritzes deep, and this is Rex.
Hello, Chanel. You
Aperol-
look like you're
2 Aperol
going for a
spritzes
summer vacation
I feel
or
like
something.
I'm back in Cinque Terre in Italy, Rexy, and we've had a few spritzes, and I'm about to dive into the dive into the ocean. But instead,
I don't feel that way in this dress. The dress like this.
well, no, not you, but instead we're filming in a 42-degree New York style loft. So I asked our guests today to come prepared to be quite relaxed in outfit, and he also looks like he's about to head to Cinque Terre in Italy as well.
I didn't get the memo.
Rex did not get the memo. He's got a moon boot on
I
too.
do have a moon boot on.
Just a lot of compressed heat. I can feel it actually steaming into me right now, but that's okay. I will survive. How are you, Rexy?
I'm well. I'm excited about our guest today, and thank you so much for joining us as well. When it comes to real estate, there's only a few banks that can assist real estate agents. Most of them don't have the specialties to work with financing rent rolls or understand real estate businesses in particular. Our guest is very senior up in a particular bank, we'll talk about in a moment, and they've got very unique old-fashioned sense of service where a lot of modern banks don't give this kind of personal, hands-on service that our guest and his bank does. So I'm really excited to delve into it. Do you want to introduce our guest?
Absolutely. We've got Adam for actually, what is your official title, Adam? Relationship manager, head of relationship management?
Professional services banking executive.
Professional. I knew it was a bit of a mouthful after a few Aperol spritzes as well. It's difficult. Professional services banking
executive
at NAB. Welcome, Adam.
Good. Adam is what to call me. So I'm just so excited to be here because I've followed the content for some time. And,
you're our one viewer.
I've had a lot of conversations with Rex and more recently Chanel, and so it's great to be here to talk about the industry that we just love.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for dressing the part as well in terms of the summer vibe that I didn't get the memo for, but I should have.
We are straight out to the rooftop pool later for a dip Rexy.
You didn't get invited. So,
no, I didn't get invited to that.
Let's start. Sorry, Rex, did you want to start? I'll start. Adam, let's start. When we had a pre-Zoom, you discussed one of the key offerings that NAB have that I don't think many of your other competitors do, which is a real consultative style. Can you talk us through
I think
style?
It starts with all banking, and I'd say all advisory capability that we provide to the industry is relationship based. So the way that NAB real estate banking and professional services, the way that we approach engagements with our clients is that we really seek to deeply understand the individual, the person behind the businesses and its decision making. And we want to understand the business, its previous performance and its strategy, and where the owners of that business are looking to take it as well. It's only by truly understanding your client can you then be able to show up for them in the best way. And the way that we do show up for them, Chanel, is we'd like to take a really consultative approach to really focus on the strategy and the objectives, the outcomes that the business is looking to achieve. So there is an element, and this is where it becomes quite obvious for us, that at some point it will have a banking implication. Whether that's financing, buying a rent roll, whether it's some advice on what to do before sale. Might be looking at the payments landscape and figuring out, is there a more efficient way to collect rent, collect sales deposits, and to be able to disperse those in real time or as close to real time as what we can as well. So our approach is consultative, first and foremost, to achieve outcomes for businesses. The way we do that is through providing banking services.
Some people hear consultative and the bank coming to talk to them, and they might get scared about this, saying, oh, I don't want to show the banks up. But that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about getting in there and helping them, aren't you? And it's more of from my understanding, it's once a month you're talking to them, and once a quarter you're meeting them face to face. And what do these meetings look like?
It's a good question. I'd say it starts with I'm really fortunate that, I'm able to continue on a legacy that, has lasted decades and decades in market. The second oldest continuous client of NAB nationally is a real estate agency group based in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne. That relationship,
How long has it been?
It's over 120 years.
Wow.
So we're not newbies when it comes to supporting real estate agencies. We know that that needs to come from never being able to stop learning and continuing to evolve with the market as well. And so it's from that legacy that the way that we approach relationships and building up this knowledge of the industry over decades is that we really start with a blank sheet of paper. We won't necessarily start with a process and a policy in front of it. Absolutely, we have those, but our clients don't really need to know about them. It starts with understanding what the client needs to do. And so the way that we will start those, either whether conversations over the phone or conversations in person with our real estate banking specialists, is that we start with understanding the person. How did it all start for them? What are their goals and objectives? We have the capability and so I guess the mindset that if we hear something that is not quite right or is on the right track, then we provide that feedback. And we're able to do that because we continue to connect with the industry as we always have, and we make sure that we've got the team with the right knowledge who provides that feedback to their clients or to those that are just kicking the tires and looking at a new financial institution. We provide a really good perspective and an honest perspective on is there anything else that we should be thinking about to either support growth, to support succession within a business, to support diversification of revenue streams. How do you make your business more resilient in times of a downturn, or how do you take advantage of specific opportunities in market in different asset classes within property as well? Starts with relationships and conversations and being honest with our clients.
Yeah.
You go.
Sorry, I'll hug you on
We
your
always
questions.
interrupt.
Yeah. Can we go on those variants? So growth. By growth, I'm assuming you mean acquiring rent rolls and growing your business through acquisitions, potentially.
One way, yep, absolutely.
And when it comes to rent rolls, there's only a few banks that lend as using their rent roll as collateral. Can you talk us about what kind of LVRs, loan to value ratios you look at? What can they use the existing rent roll as the collateral for the deposit monies, and talk us through that?
So where we look at those things, the stage of the business is really important. Is it startup and just emerging? Are these really experienced directors who, this is the 10th or 15th acquisition in a series of successful acquisitions?
If it's a startup, is there different hurdles they need to go through to get the finance, or?
It's a great question. So we like to see that there is a track record of being able to manage a rent roll. So generally we look for 2 years experience around rent roll management. Generally, we will support up to 70% of the valuation of the rent roll. We sort of think about what that looks like in Melbourne now. You're sort of looking at somewhere within the mid threes. A conversation for another time, but geez, what's happening in Adelaide and WA and a couple of those other states in terms of rent roll valuations is really interesting to dive into. But we want to make sure that the person has some capability and some competence in this space. We like to go to 70% of a sworn valuation for a rent roll. The reason why we think a sworn valuation is really important, it's objective and it's independent. We do have sworn valuers within NAB, so you don't necessarily need to get an external valuation. We can run valuations internally at no cost. So it's perhaps a little known feature of what NAB provides. Generally, we'll like to see those terms are over 10 years, Rex. Generally, there's a principal and interest component to that. But every business is a little bit different. And so, if I think about a business that we supported late last year, run by 2 directors in the early 30s, emerging families, had an opportunity to double the size of their business through a rent roll acquisition. For that one, we provided 5 years interest only and the remaining term over 10 years. So a 15-year term with amortization stepping up over time. And what we're really doing there is going back in a consultative approach. We can reel off a policy, but what really mattered to that client was they needed to preserve a little bit of cash flow to really make sure that that rent roll, doubling the size of their business, was going to be embedded really safely and sustainably. So what we didn't want to do is jeopardise how safe the embedment of that acquisition would be through imposing an arbitrary policy-driven set of terms and conditions from the bank, which weren't sustainable for the client long term. So that's why we do take an individual approach, Rex.
Which is
But
great.
you said you measure sort of their competency levels. How do you measure that? Obviously, previous acquisitions. You mentioned obviously the recent transaction was their family had been in real estate. What other metrics do you use to measure this?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's really like track record of devising a plan and then being able to successfully execute it. Yeah, doesn't necessarily even need to be in real estate. If we know that our management team or group of directors have significant capability in being able to lay out some objectives for the business, recruit the right people, really crucially, get the right systems and processes, and then being able to, they've got a track record of being able to successfully execute on those things. That to us talks to the capability. And so, there are these concepts in lending, the 3 C's. One of those is character, and it's arguably the most important, because when it comes to real estate, it is all about the directors and the
few
tone.
dodgy characters in real estate.
There's a few dodgy characters.
It's all about the tone that they set. So if we really need to, if I start with character, the second being cash flow, if you borrow it, can you pay it back? Do you have the means to be able to pay that back? And the third is collateral or security. If it all goes to pot, what do we sell? Well, the bank probably come in and take over your rent roll. And so, while the quality of the asset is really important, it's the third thing that we look at. It's not the first thing.
Have you rejected on character before?
Yes.
Can you give us an example? Not names, but not names, of course, but a situation or example of when that's happened, or what that character looked like for you as the bank to go, we don't trust this particular individual.
It's a good question. Like we've had, I've had experiences, and again, not just at my current financial institution. I sort of have a broader experience, but where clients have been struck off the register, where they've had their agent's license revoked.
Yeah.
Then
It's
that's
gotta be quite serious to do that.
Then that's a trigger for it. If we see that there are sustained mispractice within market, so if it's not just underquoting once or twice, from perhaps a relatively new sales colleague, if it's something that's more serial and endemic through the business, then that speaks to the character overall from the directors. So there are a couple of the reasons in terms of what we look at. In every industry, overwhelmingly, you get amazing operators, really successful. There's a couple of bad eggs in there, and I don't think any industry is immune to that.
Definitely not.
Hey, sorry, Rex, I'm going to ask one more question. I'll allow you to take over. So I am an owner and advisor of a broking firm, and the general conversation I'm having with clients are banks have tightened their lending. Is this true, and why? In the last 6 to 12 months, I should add.
It's a really good question. So from a personal perspective, my team generally look at, if it is ever a no, it's what's the gap between where you are now and a yes, and what do you need to do to get there? So our team are really clear with mapping out that pathway for businesses, and it might be it's a yes but not yet. Before then, what we need to see is A, B, C.
And is this factors like cash flow, interest rates have gone up, so serviceability has become more difficult? I'm sure there's several factors involved in this.
So
it's not the banks tightening up, it's external factors.
It's more so the external factors around the market, that a deal that previously stacked up doesn't stack up now is probably what's more about that. And I think we've probably seen that not just through rent roll transactions, but through the developer community as well. Transactions that stacked up under what's arguably a non-sustainable interest rate at 2%. If it doesn't stack up at 6%, it's unlikely to stack up for quite some time with what the rate profile looks like. I don't think there's something that I'm really proud of at NAB through my 15 years there is that we have only become more determined, more resolved, and have invested more in the industry. If I think about, if you come to NAB 15 years ago, even the really good times just pre-GFC, going back a while now, then we would generally go to a 60% LVR. For rent rolls, well, now we're at 70% every day of the week.
Okay.
And so, if anything, we continue to move for the
other
market.
banks, some of your competitors have 70% as well, but they want the 10% paid off within a year or two. Do you have that kind of requirement on your 70% LVRs?
On the surface, yes, but we don't want to be a slave to policy.
Yep.
And so what I mean by
sounds like
that,
you're very adaptive to depending on the circumstances.
if there's first and foremost, goes back to the person and what their goals and their objectives are. In the example that I provided previously, if you've got a business that's young directors, they're doubling the size of their business, then if we just rolled out a standard policy to them, then I don't think that transaction stacks up for them. And if I were them in my mid-30s with a hulking mortgage and a couple of kids running around and a load of business debt as well, and the bank's asking me to repay that over 10 years, then I'm not quite sure that transaction is attractive anymore. And so if you back the person, then you figure out what are the terms and conditions to be able to support what the business wants to do.
When you look at the finance portion, if you're say these young directors that we're hypothetically talking about, do you look at their personal spending as well before? And so you look at the business income, the P&L, then you look at the individual's personal spending also. Interesting.
Yeah.
Are you worried now?
No, I'm a great saver. Other than Mecca and Cookai and a couple of shopping centres, my saving is very good.
Because it talks about, I think there are cases where you can have your cake and you can eat a little bit of it. But if you want to eat all the cake, if you want to distribute all of your profits and you want to build up a tremendous lifestyle for yourself, but you're not quite sure what your exit strategy is or what your succession plan is for the business, then that for me is a bit of there's a bit of, it's not quite a balanced scenario. Got no dramas with clients living great lifestyles, and they work hard and they take risks, and with risks should come reward. So should absolutely be building up a life, a great life
So
for yourself.
The Ferrari, the Rolex, and the shoes with no socks. Is that what you're saying,
Maybe
Adam?
not the Ferrari.
All at once. If they can balance that with a really clear strategy on how they're continuing to build value in their business,
Of course.
absolutely.
Sky's the limit. You talk. Sorry, Rex. I'm interrupting
No,
so much.
no,
You
no,
go.
no,
You
no,
please.
no.
You go. Please. You
I
go.
want to step back for one moment. And when someone comes, so I think this is where a lot of agents go astray. They don't plan for an acquisition. Something comes across their desk and they just jump into it. I want to get this, like you mentioned earlier, that they had an opportunity to double it. But what I try to advise my clients is try to plan ahead and try to get your ducks in a row. So in case something comes across, you're ready for it. And I think something that I love to hear from a bank's point of view, what do you see what's ideal client? What have they got prepared before they come to you? So it makes your life easier, makes their life easier. They're not jumping through hoops or trying to get something quickly done because they've got these opportunities that come across them. If they're prepared the whole way through for when the opportunity comes through, I think it's a really strong message that a lot of agents don't necessarily do at the moment. So from a bank's perspective, what should an agent or an agency do to be ready for finance?
Yeah. So I think the first way I'd answer that question is that banks need to be prepared for the unexpected.
Yep.
So at any time, even though we connect with our clients every month and we see them every quarter, we still don't get surprised that an opportunity has just been presented to me out of the blue. I'm taking a look at it. We're undertaking DD. I need your support. And so, what really competent financiers will do is they will proactively ask those questions around sort of what's your plan and what's your strategy, and even not taking the first answer, but even pressing them a bit.
Yeah.
So, well, I know that's what you've told me, Rex, but if it did come across tomorrow, what would you do?
Yeah.
Well, what's starting to go through your mind? So that does make sure that we're putting those questions on the agenda and not just taking the first off the cuff response.
Yep.
But I think more back to the question around, so when that does happen, like what should you be doing to prepare? Getting the best advisory team around you, I just think is so important. It's the difference between a transaction being, there are issues that will always come up, but those issues are reasonably foreseen. That transactions go as smooth as what they can, and you look back at that transaction, you go, oh my God, that was the thing that transformed this business. And so the right advisors around you, even if you're planning for, I wasn't quite sure when this was going to happen, but I know when it happens, I've called Rex, I've called Chanell, I've got a financier in mind, I've had a brief conversation with them. I know the top 3 or 4 people who I'm going to reach out to when that happens. so that you're not scrambling, your contacts list, looking for referrals off a colleague or off someone you used to work with, or you're scrolling some of the socials or something
like
just
that.
just to figure it out on the run. You really want to make sure that, in terms of what to look for in an advisor, first and foremost, it has to be honesty and integrity. That the advisor, will have the integrity that if they don't think it stacks up, if they're not going to, then they will tell you. But also, to get that confidence in them, you should be able to ask that advisor, can you tell me the last 5 of these that you've done and how did they go? And is there someone that I can speak to who would talk about that experience, so that you're not just taking the Google reviews word for it?
100%. That's what about in terms of taxes? Like, should they have all their BASs in line, have all the, when they come to you, think transparency should be really important. And I think we've touched on this briefly, is that you don't want to, if when banks get uncertainty or something hasn't been disclosed to them, you do your best to get around it, but it's so much better just be transparent from day one.
Yeah. So back to that sort of, I guess, the 3 C's of lending, like back to character. Honesty and integrity is so important, just as much for the advisor or a financier as what it is for a client. And so that is, if you know something, either amazing or maybe something that might be considered adverse, just get it on the table. It's going to come on the table at some point. Make it early rather than late. But your advisors are there to help you. They're not there to run a mile. And I would say that if you get something on the table and they do run a mile, best that they run a mile at that very first conversation. Then when you're already 3/4 into the transaction and now there's something sort of come up that might have changed their appetite. And so honesty and integrity really early about getting things on the table is really key. I think that historically the bank of the ATO has been attractive, and it's been attractive because things like general interest charge has been deductible. It's been,
get it waived most of the time.
It's been relatively affordable. You can get it waived. Payment plans pretty easy to jump on. It's not the same environment with the ATO now. From the 1st of July, general interest charge will not be deductible and will be enforceable. And we don't know of a current review process that exists to be able to get it waived. And so if you think about that general interest charge now, you're looking at like 11% before any tax benefit. So sort of the after-tax impact of that, you're looking at about 15% is what your ATO debt is going to cost you. And so the bank of the ATO is starting to look pretty unattractive. Not only that, the ATO now is issuing director penalty notices with sort of 30 days to respond, far more easily.
21 days.
And what accountants are finding is that the review process, the SLA is 28 days. And so the penalty notice will be enacted even before you've got an opportunity to retract it or to challenge it. And so, look, cash flow concerns happen within businesses, and generally that's why it's not through a lack of administration and a lack of care, which is why ATO outstandings exist.
Oh, there's billions outstanding to the ATO at the moment. They don't even know if it's recoverable or not. And I think going on payment plans, I speak to accountants, like it used to be so easy for them, but now they don't want to do payment plans for their clients anymore. They send it back to the clients to do it because they can't afford, it's not justified the charge. They're charging their clients to be on the phone for 2 hours trying to.
I do have some connections in this, like of specialists that just focus on this space, around effectively acting as an agent to the ATO that sort of sits in between the client's accountant and the ATO. That
I think it's handy to have a lot of, it's almost I don't know, similar, maybe even the same companies we haven't spoken about, but it's like lawyers who just specialize in negotiating for ATOs, because accountants by nature they're not negotiators. So engaging someone who is a negotiator who just specializes in this is sometimes a better way of going about it.
I think things like having financials up to date is really important. Now they might not all be lodged with the ATO. That's okay. That's a choice for the business and their tax agent, and that's nothing that I can comment on. But having them prepared, signed off, if you are looking at a significant transaction, a financier will always ask for projections. Tell me what it's going to look like afterwards. If it's in an acquisition that's in an adjoining or a neighbouring suburb, then will there be a projected saving in occupancy costs, for example? Some of those other things. Okay, your staff costs will increase. Does that now mean that you're liable for payroll tax And is that something that you need to consider in your OPEX? So there are things that are going to make your operating expenses increase. Some will decrease. Are there any savings that you can gain around a scale of technology capability, given that you can, are you going to work with one tech stack across, across the two businesses, so the business that you're looking to acquire? So projections are really important as well, and that they have sort of the right kind of veracity, that they're verified either by a dedicated CFO within a business, or if it's a smaller business, a virtual CFO or the business's accountant. Is really important to sort of make sure that you've got
Sounds
those.
like you guys go in and help with this consultancy piece to help them through this acquisition or growth.
Do you assist with the acquisition? Like, do you assist with sort of negotiating a multiplier, recommending due diligence? Do you sort of go that hands-on if it's coming to an
We won't go, we will always have a comment around, do we think we'll ask for a contract, or a heads of agreement up front. Do we think that's a fair amount? Like, is that in line with what we're seeing in the market? And if it's significantly below, we want to understand why. Like, is there something not quite right with this rent roll? And if it's significantly above, it's, well, what is it that is so compelling about this relative to some of the other transactions in area that we've seen, that there's a premium on this? So while we will never sort of overstep our role as a financier to provide advice, but we will make comment based on, well, this is what we're seeing in the market and this is what you're presenting with us. Can you help us explain the gap?
Are you seeing a lower multiplier for rent roll acquisitions on the market at the moment, or are you seeing it still steady, sort of between 3 and 3.5?
Yeah, so I think anything within 10 kilometres of the city, if it's really well run, 3.5 every day of the week is my experience. The regions, 2.7, 2.9 if it's in a large provincial centre. And then out of suburbs, something that's sort of 2.7 to 3.2 is sort of something that we see as more realistic.
Variations, geographical spread, multi-landlords. I mean, these are obviously just approximate figures. But have you seen that it's dropped off significantly over the past 12 to 18 months? Is there still a big appetite to acquire?
It's been pretty resilient. And even, we've seen the number of, landlords as investors that have listed some of their properties. It's given sales commissions a bit of a bump, notwithstanding few extra days on market probably than what we've seen historically. But we're also have noticed that the underlying property management income and the AMI, the average annual management income, that is really resilient and is really holding up. And therefore the way that I would say tidal wave of regulation in the main, while it will always be a gripe, and it should be, there's too much red tape in managing a business, that it's still not adversely impacting how attractive it is to purchase and to support a rent roll ongoing.
Yeah. Would you say now is a good time to acquire? Like, what are the banks' sort of advice around acquiring now?
Do you know what? Like, it's such an obvious comment from me, but I guess when connecting with my colleagues from Sydney, Brizzy, Adelaide and Perth particularly, Victoria is just looking so cheap. And so like what we're starting to see, I think, in the investor market as well. And as a guide, Chanell, I look at what our private bank clients are doing. Generally, our private bank clients are the first to move in market when they spot opportunities, and our private bank clients are buying. And so when that starts to happen, I think then the market starts to move.
All the investment groups went from Perth, Queensland, now they're moving back to Melbourne. So you can see.
But I raised really briefly, what we're seeing in rent rolls out of Adelaide and out of Perth at the moment. Really well run rent rolls there are in the fours. Now, previously I had only seen that a couple of years ago, a couple of really well run businesses out of the Sutherland Shire in Sydney. So it had topped out at 4. And now, in at least 3 states, it's just not unusual for a top quality asset. And I would argue there are assets like that in this city that now are trading at a discount to where they really ought to be. So I think it's a great time.
I think so too. There's some that's selling for 3.5s and that they could potentially.
Thank you. I didn't have this advice, but now I can say that I have this advice accredited by a NAB banker when I speak to my clients. So thank you so much. Very heated discussion around rent roll prices at the moment. So you heard it here first. I'll be sniffing this particular portion and emailing this out to some clients. I think, Rex, I'm being dramatic. I won't do that.
can we go on to succession plan? I know you and I have done some seminars with RERV on this topic, and we've had private discussions about it, but I think such an important topic for the real estate community as a whole, because there's such an elderly principal dominance.
Define elderly.
You know, there's
Your age?
Could I politely say that, like, there are agents that have backed themselves and done really well, like over the past 25 years in Melbourne.
So many.
Exceptionally well.
Yep.
And there then becomes this opportunity, but also someone's opportunity is kind of someone's problem, right? And maybe it's an emerging, I don't want to throw crisis around, right? But it's an emerging issue for the industry that needs to be faced into, which is the concentration of ownership of real estate businesses and the age particularly, and sort of what the pathway to, not necessarly retirement, but what is the pathway
An exit strategy.
of selling down, of exit in that business. There's a lot have done really well over the last quarter of a century, and now sort of getting to that, just right on the cusp of, is it too late for me?
Yeah.
Which it's a really interesting challenge that the industry has at the moment.
And I think it's not just succession, it could be a legacy. You don't need to retire, you don't need to sell if you have the right succession plans where you can stay on, and it's going to earn you a lot more.
It depends on your people though, depends who you have in your business.
But that's what succession is. I think I've done succession recently in my own business, and I trained my successors for 10 years. One of them was for over 10 years. Now he's a partner. The other one was 6 years. But it took 10 years. And in that same time, I had so many other people I trained, but they don't work. So it just takes, in my opinion, and from personal experience anyway, it takes such a long time to find the right people and groom them to that role, that any principal should start looking at it yesterday.
Well, what did you say? Succession planning should have started 10 years ago. I will not articulate myself well. The first best time was 10 years ago, and the second best time is now, right?
Yep. And I'd argue it's not too late for anyone.
Yeah, 100%.
It's not too late to call your advisor, get the right team around you. All right, this is where I want to be in 1, 3, 5, 10 years. I've got this amazing asset that I've built up. What does my transition look like? And it's okay not to know all the answers to that, but to go on your own exploration pathway of finding that out and bouncing ideas off advisors along the way.
And having different options. So a lot of people don't realize there's options available to you. And just because you don't have the right person in your business now, offering someone a partnership based on certain KPIs or goldstones, you can attract the right people. And you can get a recruiter to go find the right people.
Well, I think it really comes down to, a lot of directors hold on to equity, but realistically, when there's spread equity or shared equity with high performers earlier on in their career, it means that they can succession plan out, knowing there's someone running their business that has a vested interest in it. Do you know what I mean? But a lot of directors don't want to give out equity.
But I think directors sometimes don't realize potentially that if they don't give away equity, they're just going to sell an asset.
Correct.
If you sell an asset, you're selling a multiple of a rent roll. No one's going to buy your sales business. When you internally bring in directors, you sell a part of your sales business and you sell a part of the same rent roll. You have a legacy piece where you're going to maintain the portion of the sales business as well for yourself, which if you work over a 10-year period, it is probably more than what the rent roll is. And that's what they're leaving on the table by not giving away equity.
That concept of grow the pie, right? So your slice might be a bit smaller relative to all the others over time, but the pie is so much bigger. If you bring partners in who help you grow the pie.
We are fortunate enough to work with some of the biggest agencies in Victoria. None of them are sole practitioners. All of them have multiple partners, and they've got offices of 140 to 180 people. And the way they've grown it is by bringing on people. I think that you work with the same people. So.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, people is one of the most important parts of a business. You want to grow it, scale it, sell it. You need to have the right people in there.
I think that's right, and you're right. Like, exit doesn't mean that you walk away from a business that you've put your heart, your soul, your energy. You've given up time with the family, all these sacrifices that you've made over such a long period. There is a way where you can still be a key part of the business. You might not have a majority share in it anymore. That's okay. You can progressively sell down and still be actively involved in the business. And I think I'd go so far as to say, I think the the board and the other owners in the business, would still love to have your advice in the business
And
as
you
well.
make more money over a period of time too. You make a lot more money even from the initial sale part because you're selling the sales business as well as the PM business.
We've done numbers on this. There's a great case study that we have on this where director looked at a 10-year, effectively had a 10-year time horizon, was in his early 50s and figured by the time I get to 60, I reckon I'm done. And here's my case study for we should have started Succession 10 years ago. He's just done it so perfectly. But over that journey, went from effectively all him, 100% owner, largely responsible for the listings, had a property management business. There was no equity there. What the choices that director had made over that 10-year period had tripled the size of the business, went from owning 100% to owning 20%. But that share of 20% plus the dividends that they had made and so the wealth
And the
that
sale
had been
price
accrued
throughout the period too.
over that period was around about 30 to 40% better off through from Succession than if you had just stayed in the business from 50 to 60, done nothing, and to your point, Rex, sold the asset.
Makes so much sense.
And I think this is where, again, some directors don't realise that value. You're going to make more.
I think part of it, and I think that's the job of advisors, that we need to make these case studies transparent as well around you have tons of options.
But your typical advisor, and I'm not trying to talk badly about any advisors, they deal with an issue that's brought to them. They don't go exploring for other stuff. So they go, I'm buying this rent roll. Okay, cool. I'll do the transaction. That's it. Thank you. Goodbye. They don't build that relationship.
It's not consultative.
It's not consultative. So
That's where it's got to come. Like the advisory capability the advisor has to come from a position of curiosity first.
100%.
Just seek to understand before you punch out an opinion and, okay, this is the way that it's going to work and this is the transaction, rather than let's try and firm up what your strategy is and what your objectives are. Then we'll figure out the pathways, and it will be multiple pathways. So it's not a simple process, if you like, because it takes a bit of you want to be able to consider not just the obvious option that's right in front of you. There might be some others out there.
But the right advisor will know the options for you. When you go to the right advisor, they've seen most of it before in your industry, so they can go, okay, you can do this, 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 this. When if you haven't got that experience and you've never done it yourself, so you need someone to guide you. If they don't have the experience, you're kind of stuck in this, well, what do I do?
I think that's right. And you just think about all the choices that directors have to make every day. When they front up at work, every day, the choices that they need to make around, with people, with key vendors, with the sales teams, with their marketing strategy. It's not surprising that this is an event somewhere off in the distant horizon, and it can so easily be that thing that I'll get to.
You blink your eyes and 5 years has passed.
It is
25 years has passed.
Yeah, in some instances.
It's a difficult mindset shift to bring that to the front of your mind rather than always it being at the back. I think, we're sitting here in this hot loft, everyone's just got back off the beach. Back into the office. We're we're into March now. It is that time where business owners have contemplated, had an opportunity to contemplate things over the summer break. Generally, we find that this is when our clients are most active, where they're the most certain on, I've been thinking about everything that we discussed in the lead up to Christmas when things started to get a bit crazy. I've got 3 ideas that I want to run by you. I'm thinking about doing X. So we generally find that now is a really good opportunity where those mindsets are fresh, people's minds are relatively clear before the crazy has started for the year. To be able to take action on some of these sort of longer term objectives that we're looking to achieve.
Makes sense.
I do that with
Rexy, as much as I know you want to keep chit-chatting,
Sorry.
which we can do, Chev is telling
yes.
us it's they've run out of tape. So we actually need to wrap this up.
Of course.
Adam, there's so many different topics that we could delve into, and I think we need to get you back for a part 2 when it's not boiling 40 degrees in a hot box. But I've taken so much from this, and I think that exactly like what you said, I think that a lot of real estate officers get bogged down in the day-to-day, that they don't actually take the time to think about what the next 10, 20, 30 years is going to look like. So I think there's so much value that NAB can bring. And I really enjoyed the consultative piece that they have. I think it's a real point of difference
It
against
really
other
is.
banks.
Old-fashioned values
Really nice.
and service.
Thank you so much, Adam, for being
It's been such
guest
a
today.
pleasure, Chanell and Rex. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. And we will see you on the next episode of Real Estate Renovators. Bye.